Now, the iPad is changing everything for Apple and, frankly, every company that's in the PC or the tablet business. For perspective on Apple's very impressive earnings reports, let's bring in Erfon Elijah, a contributor with the blog The Cult of Mac. He joins us now from Seattle. And on the phone, we've got Eugene Munster, managing director at Piper Jaffray, joining us from Minneapolis. So, Gene, I'd like to start with you. What are your thoughts on this report that Apple's directors have been out there talking to recruiters about the succession plan?
Well, if they have, I think it's just going through just the process. Obviously, Tim Cook is the guy. I think the probability that it's not Tim Cook is pretty close to zero. So, yes, there may be out there doing this just as part of the process, but the reality is it's Tim Cook, so it doesn't matter.
So how can Apple keep up this momentum, Gene?
Well, if you look at the markets that they're going after, they're big, and that's the simple takeaway is that they still have relatively small market share. The mobile phone market, obviously, 1.4 billion units a year. A lot of those are feature phones that are going to be smartphones, and Apple can continue to sell iPhones into that market. And so the pool that they're fishing into is big enough that this can continue to grow at 30% for the next 3 or 4 years, which sounds impossible given this is a $100 billion plus company, but the reality is the markets are big enough to sustain that.
Now, Erfon, what are your thoughts on the product numbers here? We're hearing from the CFO that they sold every single iPad that they built.
Gosh, you know, that doesn't surprise me. I was on the waiting list. I bought 3 different iPads, 2 for friends, then 1 for myself, and every single time I was on a waiting list. And every time I'd call the Apple Store or go into the Apple Store, they always had a line. So, I mean, they were selling as many of these things as they can make. And I've been hearing a lot of buzz. You know, I talked to a lot of people about Apple products, and a lot of people are interested in the iPad too. My own mother asked me, not for a tablet, not for a computer, she asked me for an iPad. So if my own mother knows about the iPad, Apple's doing something right.
Erfon, it's Julie here, but does your mother know about Lion? Does your mother know about iCloud? I'm curious about sort of the next generation of products here. The company talking about these on the conference call today, saying Lion's coming tomorrow, saying iCloud's going to be up and running by the fall. How are the expectations for those?
No, I mean, I think one of the big appeal of the iPad is it's easy to use, it's easy to manage. I mean, my mom doesn't have to care, and the average user doesn't have to care about any of that stuff because the iPad just works really well. And it's exciting to me because Lion is going to add a lot of features to the iPad and to Apple's notebooks and stuff. And then when we see the iPad refresh, probably in 9 months or so, I'm just guessing, it's going to have a bunch of new features too. So the iPad is a new product that I think they've just scratched the surface with what it's capable of, and it's just going to keep getting better and better. And at an under $1,000 price point too, it's affordable to a lot of people.
Gene, what about the iPhone numbers? 20 million units. I found that kind of surprising, given that we're expecting an iPhone 5 as early as September.
Yeah, that was the real headline here is iPhone was as strong as it was. Everyone knows iPhone 5 is coming out in September, so he obviously had that number would have been even better if that not the case because people are holding off on buying for iPhone 5. And so, you know, I think that just speaks to the momentum of the iPhone, and the reality is that this is, as we talked about earlier, this is just a really big market.
Hey, Gene, Julie here. I just want to take a step back for a moment and go back to the headline numbers for the quarter. And this is something I talk to a lot of analysts about. If this is a company that so consistently beats expectations, why doesn't everybody learn their lesson and bring up those expectations if they keep outperforming?
Well, we do, and I mean, if you look at this quarter, it would have implied, if you'd have taken their consistent beat, it would have implied $6.70 a share in earnings, and they basically did $1 better than that. So I guess the point is that we can use all the math we want to, but it just seems to be, they seem to be beating at an accelerating rate. And I think the reality is Apple doesn't even realize how good their business is. They don't have a crystal ball, and they're subject to the same assumptions that we are. But things just continue to do better than even they had expected.
Well, where does the surprise come from? I mean, at the end of the day, Apple is selling things. So you would think that you would be able to go to stores, see what kind of volume they're moving, et cetera, et cetera. Where does the surprise come from when you get numbers like this that are such a beat?
And the biggest factor here is the iPhone, and the tough part is that the iPhone is getting sold around the world. So we used to do this a lot a few years ago, is go and sit in front of Apple stores and count different products, and it was a great way to predict how the quarters are going. But as obviously their footprint is global now, and we've talked about the importance of emerging markets and how the impact that had, it just gets really hard to track all of that. And so I think they're getting more carriers, they're going to more countries, they have more products with the iPad now. The number of variables that analysts need to keep an eye on is getting exponentially more difficult.
Gene, what's your take on the international numbers? I mean, they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
I think it's the part that's most impressive is that Apple's never been successful really outside of Western Europe, the UK, and the US. And we talked about earlier that China number. And I think what it really speaks to is there's a shift in how people are using technology. It's these countries haven't had a big jump in terms of their buying power, but consumers are seeing a shift to a computer or a cell phone to a computer in your pocket, and they're willing to spend more. So I think what's happening here is these emerging markets people are realizing, even though historically they haven't had the money to buy these products, they are, because they're seeing the utility of a computer in your pocket, essentially. And so that's really what attributes this growth.
And still in China, the iPhone is only available on one of the 3 major carriers, so there's still a lot of growth potential there as well. All right, Eugene Munster of Piper Jaffray, Erfon Elijah of Cult of Mac, thank you both for joining us for this discussion.